Summit conversation today. You're most welcome from wherever you are in the world. I'm Alex Bell, and I'm proud to be the lead for engagement at the Power of Us, agency.com, and also joint country lead with Justin Blake. Over to you, Justin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Justin Blake. I'm the education lead for ABA, based in the UK, working with schools, education organisations, and also part of the Harvard University Human Flourishing Community of Practice, working with thought leaders around the world. And it's really a great pleasure for Alex and I to lead the session with you today. So thanks for joining us.
So we've got 45 minutes together to talk about culture as a summit conversation. If you've ever been lucky enough to go to the summits in Helsinki, it's a really good place for having small conversations based on quite large presentations and ideas. So we're looking at how to transform culture and lead change effectively. Now, Justin and I are going to take a few minutes each just to give you some ideas to play with. And next slide. So here's my premise to all of you. We all know the obvious facts about what happened last year. 2020, in my view, changed everything. Changed everything in really large ways and even in small ways. Now you'll know in your context, in your part of the world, how much it changed, but I can't think of anybody that would say things stayed the same. So if the world has changed and the culture around it is shifting, then my premise to us is, I think in education, we have an opportunity that we could and should change things as well. So let me take you through my ideas. In England, we had lockdown. It started in March last year. And at that point, it was where the culture of school and home collided. Up until then, families would send their young people to school and not really have an understanding of what was going on. And then suddenly, if they were lucky enough to go online, the families would see actually firsthand under their own roofs on their screens what was going on. But that wasn't even the best that was going on there. Schools were then deep in the triage of social justice. Schools were having to abandon education in many cases to prioritize just making sure they were the lifeline for their families. So many of the families that I work in the UK were the food bank for their families. So they had to work on that before they could even think about a culture of learning. And inversely, at home, many families themselves were actively at the forefront of what learning meant or learning culture meant for their children. And for some, that was a wonderful opportunity. And I think the ones that did their best, they just enhanced the learning of their everyday family activities. And at worst, they were doing school badly, or there was no learning going on at all because there were too many other priorities for survival, really, going on for them there. So there was that triage of families being faced with what learning actually meant and what the culture of school learning meant for them as well. Inequality was exposed, just the sort of the digital divide about who had access to online materials and many other things that perhaps weren't as exposed before 2020. And there wasn't just one pandemic of COVID-19. At the same time, let's not forget the deep-rooted racism that was brought to the fore via the murder of George Floyd and the consequent Black Lives Matters protests really exposed things which hadn't been exposed in the same way before. People were talking about issues which they hadn't before. The Me Too movement, the gender and sexual justice movement, again, was something which was sort of really rising in public consciousness. And my premise is that things were changing about who was in charge of these agendas, who's in charge of the issues of the day. And in the UK, many of our exams were cancelled. So the kind of the end result of what the sort of purpose of education for some people was absolutely shifted. You know, we had to think about with what learning goes on for the sake of it, and it's good for that child, as opposed to just being for exams. So the rules changed of who was in charge. So families and educators had no choice but to take a view on the purpose of education. It was right there under their noses, under their own roofs. And families and educators could no longer stay separate from the burning issues of the day, and his Greta, who again during that time was becoming more and more a voice of young people with young people. So where does that leave us in the HundrED community? HundrED is really focused on the solutions, not the problems. We're not here to say what's wrong with the world. We're here to say how can we help make things better. So my premise to all of us is, in terms of culture, we're in charge. We can see from those public demonstrations, we can see from things shifting from those in charge in jurisdictions to people themselves. So the premise that I'd like to explore with today in the breakout rooms later on is that it is this concept of people-powered innovation in education. Now that's just a theory, so let's make it something more tangible. I was lucky enough during lockdown to be part of the HundrED community that put together, we believe, the world's first global youth club by young people for young people. It addressed isolation, and it also addressed the big concern that we had about division of jurisdictions. You know, countries and politicians being more divided, and we wanted young people to come together even more. So if you'd like to check it out, it's called Link Online Learners. It's self-organized, nobody's in charge. It's based on empathy and curiosity, and I think sometimes in learning and education, those things are put last rather than put first. And it's credible. You know, we've been cited by HundrED, by the OECD, and we are shortlisted for a British Council Global Award next week. So we're hopefully credible as well. And then the second thing I'd love to share with you is the organisation I'm working with now, the Power of Us Agency, which is looking at how we need to respond to the changes that happened in 2020 as schools and as organisations involved with education and elsewhere. So do check those out. Now, I've said these things about how we need to respond to the change, and very sadly, Sir Ken Robinson passed away last year, and he says so eloquently how we need to refocus how we think about the culture of learning. So over to Ken just for a few minutes.
This is as pointless and unsustainable in its own way as agricultural systems are based on industrial principles. Human beings are like the rest of life on Earth. We flourish under certain conditions and we wither in other circumstances. The other parallel is this, that when I say that agricultural systems, the sustainable systems, are based on cultivating the soil, this is also true of our communities, in our cities, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, that people flourish when the culture is right. Great teachers, great principals, great school systems understand that you don't make a successful education system based on driving people through pointless systems of tests and output and data-driven hurdles, that the way you get people to flourish is by recognizing their individuality, the great diversity and depth of people's talents. For our children from every age are full of boundless possibilities. And you do that by creating a mix.
Oh.
That the way you get people to flourish is by recognizing their individuality, the great diversity and depth of people's talents. For our children from every age are full of boundless possibilities. And you do that by creating a mixed culture in schools, one that values the sciences, the arts, technology, that values individual talent, the driving force of individual passions. In other words, successful schools don't focus on output, they focus on culture, in the same way that sustainable farmers focus on the soil. If you get the culture right, everything else takes care of itself. And that really means a culture of compassion, of collaboration, of empathy, and of the valuing of individuals and the necessity of our social lives thriving through our joint participation. By the way, if we've found out anything in this pandemic, it's how fundamentally we rely on these sorts of processes when the chips are down. The great suffering that's been afflicting many people during the pandemic is isolation. We've had to isolate ourselves. It's been vitally important to stop the spread of the virus. But we all know what terrible prices people have been paying in terms of their mental health by being isolated. And how are they dealing with it? By turning to creative work, to painting, to music, to collaboration, through joining together, through joint projects like this process today, Unite. We're here all today because we need to connect. We need to see each other in our own settings, and we need to see each other through the phase and lens of our common humanity. So I believe profoundly that getting back to normal won't work. We've pressed pause on many of our social systems. It's time to press reset on them as well. There is a chance to do that. You know, lots of people have been spending time at home, learning with their children with their peer groups. I believe the most successful, and I know we've spoken to a lot of parents, the most successful examples are where parents haven't felt the need to replicate school. There's a big difference between learning, education, and school. Learning is the most natural process in the world. We love to learn. We're deeply curious creatures, highly creative, deeply compassionate, and highly collaborative. People love to learn from a very early age. Not everybody gets on with education. A lot of people don't like school. And I say that not in criticism of teachers. I've spent my life working with teachers, and I have the deepest respect for teachers. I am a teacher, frankly, so I'm not here to criticize them in any way, whatever, but to support them. The problem is not teachers, it's not kids, it's not families, it's how we do school. We've come to think of schools as particular types of places that resemble in many key respects the algorithms and principles of standardization and of factory life. And there isn't any reason for schools to be that way. We can reinvent school, we can revitalize learning, and we can reignite the creative compassion of our communities if we think differently when we try to go back to normal.
So here's my question to all of you for the first breakout room. Ken set the tone there, that he spoke those words at the beginning of the first lockdown we had in the UK. So I'm going to ask you, if there was one culture change from 2020 that you would like education to build on, what would that be?
A great conversation to be beginning together and continuing through the summit and beyond the summit. What culture change from 2020 in your journey, your community, can you be bringing into your setting and your context? We're just waiting for the other breakout rooms to join us. So we just got another 20 seconds or so. We're really excited to be exploring this theme of leading culture, how to transform culture and lead change effectively. Such an important and really exciting topic as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. Virtual Parents Evenings, better contact, better environment, better reach. You won't ever go back, which is that's amazing. And no have to struggle to park your car in the car park.
Great. Have we got
Thank you.
Everyone back in now, Alex?
Yeah, they're coming back in.
Great. Welcome back, everybody. So, Alex, my slides aren't moving. Could you bring your slides up if I stop screen sharing and you go through the slides for us?
Bottom left-hand corner, the arrows?
No, nothing's happening for some reason. I don't know why. Apologies, everybody.
Okay.
I'm going to stop sharing. If you bring the slides up and you do them for us, that would be great.
No problem at all.
Thank you. Welcome back to those who've just joined us from our breakout rooms, and great to have everyone here with us. The topic of culture change is so important. As Ken Robinson was saying, what is vital in education and any organisation is culture. And that's also about leadership. All of us can lead. And I was reflecting on how Nelson Mandela, who famously said, education is the greatest way to change our world, is a great example of leadership and values-led culture change, and how Nelson Mandela himself had values that were transformational for different cultures and contexts. And I'm going to talk you through now some examples of how this can be really practical in a school setting, in your education organisation, in your context, based on research, based on lots of work that I and others have done with schools. And the first process first part of the process is really to get clear on your vision. And this applies for you personally, as well as to your organization, your setting. So you can actually apply this in your own life and it will have a really transformative impact as well. And that first phase is vision. What is your vision for your life? What is the vision for your school or your learning organization? And that's about imagination, imagining the culture that you and your organization want to actually create. This is so powerful and it's so exciting. It's our schools that can also shape not just future people, but also the future of our society. The second stage, Alex, if we could move on for us. The second stage is looking at, go back one, is our mission. What will you prioritize with your vision? So firstly, vision, getting clear on the vision for your culture. And then the mission, what will we prioritize with this vision, with our vision that we're committed to? And that means not focusing on some other things, getting really clear on what we want to prioritize as part of our mission. Our mission at HundrED is to inspire impactful innovations and to scale those. And in a way that education innovations are supporting children around the world and educators to flourish and thrive. Alex, if you could move on the slide for me. And the third phase is all about values. What are your values at the moment as an individual? Maybe you haven't reflected much on your values recently. That'd be a really powerful process to engage with. What are your values? What are your main values as a person at the moment in your journey? But also, what are the values for your organization, for your school setting, for your community, for those you're working with? Our shared values shape our behaviors and our culture. It has been said many, many times that culture will always outperform or trump strategy. No matter how great the strategy, the policy, the ambition, the leadership, the culture is what will actually have the most impact and influence. So it's vital that we are reflecting on and putting into practice how to have a transformative and innovative culture. Alex, next slide, please. Thank you. Here's a great example of how you can put these insights, this research, into practice. Vision and mission works hand in hand with your values. The values drive our culture. Our culture drives and reinforces our behaviors. And our behaviors continue to enable our vision and our mission. If every school and every education organization put this into practice, it will have a transformative effect on developing our young people, on developing our schools, and will enable us to also become more transformative and more innovative. There's a fantastic report on our HundrED website, which is about developing innovation-friendly cultures. That's about leadership. That is about being able to hold uncertainty, experimentation, developing, implementing, and financing, resourcing innovation. Next slide, please, Alex. We work with lots of schools. Academies Enterprise Trust is one example. And out of that process of working with them on their vision, their mission, their values, and to have 3 or 4 values at the most is a great place to start, rather than having too many values. And it's not even about having posters on a wall or having slogans. This is about embedding it in behaviors, in leadership, in our individual educators and behaviors, and our young people as a whole system, as a whole culture. There's a question coming through in the chat. How do we change culture? We have to change that by modeling it. That's a great question. It is hard for schools. It has to start with leadership. It has to start with all of us together as well, working together with our values, our mission, and our vision. But it's about modeling it and committing to it together and letting go of some other behaviors that are not helpful. We've got a video here which we might play at the end, which we might come back to. But Alex, can you go to the next slide for us? just for the sake of time. So we might show that video at the end. Here's our breakout room question now. What are some of the values that really matter to you as an educator, as a leader at the moment? And how can we help develop and change the culture in our organizations or our schools, our settings? How can we support a more transformative and innovative culture where we are working in education?